So Todd Garland at Toddo. The title of my talk today is Bootstrapping Profits. And outside the tech world and in other parts of the world, we tend to just call this building a business or putting food on the table. So unfortunately today, I might not say some things that you may be expecting to hear from me, given the title of the talk, Bootstrapping Profits. But before I disappoint you all, I'd like to tell you a little bit about buy-sell ads and really the story of buy-sell ads and how I took a tiny idea that was a night and weekend project and turned it into something that I truly love waking up to every morning and building. The hearts might have been a little overkill, but I was having fun in Keynote. So I'm sure the first thing you're thinking is, great, the world needs more ads, right? There's definitely a lot of ads online, but that's not really what the story of buy-sell ads is about. At buy-sell ads, the story is really about bringing efficiency to a process that was truly broken. I can't say I'm proud to say this, but we don't have one salesperson at the company. We're really all product people, account managers, and we don't necessarily force sales on people like what is traditional in the ad space. We really just build software that helps advertisers and publishers get the deal done more efficiently. So to add some context, we're about 5 years in, so we've been doing this for a while. We're 19 people now, all remote, by the way. By the end of this year, we will have done about 50 million in transactions. Now, that's not this year, that's across all 5 years. And we've raised $0 in funding. We're definitely not the largest company on the block, but we're also not the smallest. To tell you a little bit about myself, and yes, that's my 7-month-old daughter who's helping me out here. I'm from a little town in Maine called Cape Porpoise in southern Maine. And in the summers, I would caddy at the golf course carrying golf bags and wash dishes at night at a local restaurant. My mom was a teacher and my dad was an insurance salesman. Growing up, our family had a computer, a Commodore 64. Maybe some of you in this room remember that and have actually had one in your house as well. But to be truthful, I don't really remember much about that computer other than using it to play some video games and maybe using the encyclopedia because we didn't have the bookshelf version. At school, we had the early Macs, and to be truthful there, I don't remember much other than playing Oregon Trail. All this is to say, I'm not the typical story of, I wasn't putting computers together at 8 and winning science competitions at 12. I'm definitely not a whiz kid. My first experience on the web was actually building what used to be called an e-zine. The e-zine that I built was called International Exchange Student News. I built this after spending a year abroad in Brazil, and it was really my first experience building for the web. I didn't really know what I was doing. As you can see, it looks like I have a nice little Java applet there with some profiles, free email accounts that you could get at exchangestudentnews.com, and just all these kinds of things that were kind of cobbled together back in the day, which was probably a bunch of CGI scripts or something like that. Fast forward a few years, and I caught on with all the glory of the CSS galleries, and I used to run one called CSS Elite. And so this is me getting closer to kind of understanding, ads on the web and stuff like that. You can see some ads in the right column there. Let's see. And I had another site that I used to run as well called 13 Styles. Now, looking back on these sites and having honed my skills a little bit better now, I've got to admit they are kind of embarrassing. But this is really just me kind of getting my experience on the web and kind of what led me to buy-sell ads. You can actually see down in the bottom right, sorry for folks in the back, that little advertise here box, which is kind of the first instances of buy-sell ads on the web. And so, really how I came across the idea for buy-sell ads was I was in the car with my wife and my dog Rusty there. We were driving up to Vermont to go skiing for the weekend. This is my good old 2002 Jeep Grand Cherokee. The heat didn't work, the AC didn't work, and the antifreeze used to leak inside the car, so we'd have to travel in the car with paper towels to wipe the interior of the windshield while we were driving. And an advertiser emailed me and said, hey, I'd like to buy an ad on CSS Elite. And so I said, well, I'm gone for the weekend, but I'll get back to you on Monday. Around this time was also when I was building a lot of conversion pages for pay-per-click marketing. So, those are the types of pages where you click on an ad on Google, you get to this site, and then you're like, why can't you just let me go to the main website? I don't want your stupid marketing page. So I was building lots of conversion pages like that. And I said, you know what, why can't I just have one of those for ads? Why can't I replace my advertise here page with something like that, but it'll also take their creative, their credit card info, and it'll put the ad live on my site without me having to talk to them. Here's a little bit of proof that I actually was driving in Vermont, and that's a real story. Ben & Jerry's. And so, the next thing I did that week, once I got back from skiing, is I tried to figure out if it would actually work. And so the first thing I did was just open up Excel. And this is it was pretty fun preparing for this talk, going back through and looking at some of these early spreadsheets and things, and even just trying to find them. This was actually the first spreadsheet I built to validate the money side of buy-sell ads. Now, looking at this now, I don't understand what half of it actually means, but somehow this allowed me to convince myself that this was a project worth doing. So some interesting things here. You can see I priced out Amazon Web Services. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to reliably serve the ads on my own. I couldn't afford to buy 10, 15 different servers globally distributed to serve ads properly across the web. You can see there too that I figured out pretty quickly that I'm going to have to actually figure out how to do the harder ad serving at some point, because this isn't going to scale at 140K a month to serve ads. And then these things over here, I have no idea what they mean. But suffice to say, this got me started. And this is what I used to say, hey, let's do this. Here is before Patrick and Stripe existed, me trying to navigate the payment processors of the world. And it's funny looking back now, seeing I put the monthly volume at $1 million. I'm sure I must have been, having fun playing with these spreadsheets. But sometimes, when you're imagining building something, you don't necessarily need to back up everything that you're trying to do with fact. Sometimes you just need some sort of arbitrary goal that's out there to try and hit. And you never know. Sometimes things like that can happen just by having that goal out there and in your mind. Here's the first spreadsheet I used to project our expenses to get started. So assuming that font's too small, there's some servers, authorize.net, SSL certificate, trust ECL. I never ended up purchasing that. But again, and I have no idea what those numbers are at the bottom, but somehow this allowed me to budget for my personal savings to get things started. So a quick timeline for buy-sell ads. February 2007, drive to Vermont, came up with the idea. September 2007, I finished version 1. During that time, I was just freelancing. One of the companies I was freelancing for is HubSpot. Has anybody here heard of HubSpot? A couple hands, yeah. So they're another company in Boston. I think they've raised now somewhere like 50 some odd $1 million. There's like 500 employees, way too big for my taste and the kind of company I like to work at. But I mean, they're probably going to IPO or something like that for over $1 billion. So they're definitely the opposite side or opposite end of the spectrum to what buy-sell ads is. Not only in terms of how it's being grown and run, but also they're all about not actually buying advertising, and I'm about buying advertising. I signed on at HubSpot shortly after I finished building the first version. I was getting married in September, and some part of me felt like I needed to have and prove to myself and family that I could have a real job. I think as freelancers, all of us know, for those here who are freelancers, sometimes people don't really understand what freelancing is. It's like they don't necessarily think that it's legitimate. And so for some reason, I decided to sign on HubSpot. I stayed there for about a year. And in February 2008, I launched Buy Sell Ads while I was still at HubSpot. January 2009, I left HubSpot and to work on Buy Sell Ads full time. So you can see here, in terms of the timeline, about 2 years passed from concept to real working product to replacing my full-time salary and being able to go out on my own and really build a company that I was truly passionate about building. With the caveat that there was a 6-month hiatus there between when I actually finished writing the software and launching the product. If I were to say anything, somebody had asked Patrick what was one of the biggest mistakes he felt he had made. Mine was just not shipping. I mean, I think if anything, and I've learned this lesson time and time again, you just got to ship. No matter what it looks like, no matter how many things are broken, you just got to ship. The first version of Buy Sell Ads we put out there, I'd be frantically going to the website, taking a screenshot of it, bringing it into Photoshop, resizing it, and manually FTPing it to a server so that somebody would think that their listing page that lists their website ad sizes for sale just magically had this screenshot appear. So you just got to ship. So how did I make the decision to jump and go from a nights and weekend project and full-time job to a real thing and build a real company? For me, it was really just all about the money working out. I mean, it was time to quit my full-time job because 2008 earnings ended up around 80 grand. And then I tried to figure out, like, is this something that is actually going to sustain itself and that I'll be able to continue building against? And so I just plotted out a couple scenarios. Again, opening trusty old Excel. I plotted out a worst case if things stay the same, and then a best case. We ended up somewhere in the middle, and luckily things just kind of generally worked out there. And then this is what actually happened. So this shows, and I know it's going to be impossible to read, but this shows the numbers kind of working out, showing us serving about 1 billion impressions February 2009, the serving costs at about $2,000, and so that all worked out based on that original, very simple spreadsheet in the beginning. December 2009, we sold about 350K in ads, ending the year out at 2.5 million in ad sales. So the machine was working, the things were scaling nicely. The business structure, and I don't want to get into too much of the nitty-gritty, but the business structure, or I'll have to say lack thereof, was just Todd Garland doing business as Buy Sell Ads. I feel like one of those questions people often ask is, well, what do I need, an S Corp or a C Corp or an LLC and all these different things? It doesn't matter. Just get going. And once the product works and is running and you're making money, you're going to figure it out. Risky? Of course. But I don't have any money, so who cares? Sue me. It didn't cost me a dime to set up, and I was able to get going. If you do want the nitty-gritty, Garrett has a great book, Starting and Sustaining. It's $99, and he helps you navigate kind of a lot of the more intricate things of between selecting payment processors. Although you don't have to do that now, you can just use Stripe. To figuring out the structure of your company in those things like that. And I'm not going to plug Drew and Josh's book or Josh and Drew's book. I'm not sure which way you guys prefer to have that, because I assume everybody here already has it. So how did we attract our first users? Another question I always get asked. We just sent them emails. I think one of the things that people really appreciate online these days is just being authentic. I can tell you, every single email I sent to try and convince somebody to use Buy Sell Ads was an email that I sat down and wrote at that moment. Another thing we did, and let me just read some of this. Hey, David, I noticed you have a bunch of sponsors in the sidebar. I'd love to help make it easier for you to manage those and also bring you some new advertisers. We're still in private beta, but the product is solid and working really well for logopon.com, CSSelite.com, and 13styles.com. I'd love to add you to the list. If you're interested to see what's inside, here's an invitation code. If you have any questions or if there's anything I can do to help, please let me know. And one thing that we did is that invitation code, let me go back. That invitation code didn't actually do anything. So I would just make up some random string of numbers every time I sent out an email to make them feel special. And just the presence of that string meant you could register. And for the record, we still do that today with one of our new products. So the point there is don't waste time building features that can be easily faked. You know, we stayed in what we called private beta for over a year using the fake invite system. I'm not sure this works really well today because people get angry about things saying beta, or it's kind of come and gone. But the point is, you know, we kept it gated, and that worked for us at that time. And another thing that it's kind of common sense these days is we're just incredibly responsive, which since everybody's responsive these days already, you have to be even more responsive. How did I hire our first employee? Another good question I often get asked. And what was really fun about this presentation is going back and finding these kind of relics of buy-sell ads. So this is the original email that I sent to who is now my co-founder, Nathan Dev, back in 2008. So the subject line of the email, I put PHP. And I didn't even capitalize the first sentence. I said, have you worked with CodeIgniter, Authorize.net, sorry Patrick, and PayPal IPN before? He wrote back, he said, hi, I've worked with Authorize.net a bit, PayPal fairly extensively, and CodeIgniter only on one brief occasion. I wrote back, this time I capitalized because I was serious. Are you busy these days, and would you have free time for a rather large project? If so, what hourly rate makes you happy? So there wasn't much strategy that went into this first hire. Obviously, I didn't actually know that he was going to become a real full-time employee and eventually co-founder. And you know, in that sense, I was very lucky that those things worked out the way they did. But the point is I just got out there and tried to find somebody. I found somebody that fit with my personality, as you can see by our curt replies, and it just kind of worked. Oh, I just spoiled it. So the better part of the story is after he had been working on building the new product, because we wanted to rewrite the entire version of the software because I wrote the original buy-sell ads, 100% of it, and that was most definitely not going to scale at all. Not technically, but like from actually building product on top of product, it was disgusting. And so we were doing a rewrite from scratch, also to help clear up any legal issues I may have had with HubSpot, since I was a full-time employee there. And I kept wondering, you know, why is this guy just not online during the day? He only comes online like after 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And so one day he caught me on Skype and he said, hey Todd, there's something I need to tell you. And I was like, oh geez, you know, I'm gonna have to hire another developer. He's gonna bail on the project. We're only a couple months away from having the rewrite finished. And he said, I'm still in high school. And so that was like the best possible thing he could have said, because I was like, oh great, that means you can still work on the product and we can keep going. So suffice to say, he graduated high school in June, and the next day he was working at buy-sell ads full time. This is after, I don't know how many days he must have skipped of school once we relaunched the rewrite April 15th. But I just find that incredibly fascinating, how that kind of played out. So another thing is, you know, if you're not a developer, how do you get started? Like, how did I build buy-sell ads if I'm not a developer? You know, it's like, well, you know, if you're trying to start an auto mechanic shop and you don't know how to fix a car, what do? You just try and fix the car. You open up a manual, you try to figure it out. It's the same thing. You know, if you're not an accountant, if you're not a salesperson, if you're not a good manager, you know, if you don't know how to ride a bike, what do? You just figure it out. And so I think the biggest thing, especially for folks in this room, you know, being builders, being creators and makers, that you know is that you really do just have to be resourceful. It's all about resourcefulness. And that's kind of your biggest asset when you're going out there and trying to make some money on your own and bootstrap something. Come on, figure it out. So let's talk a little bit about bootstrapping. Pretty obvious, but revenue minus expenses is your profit, and hopefully that number is greater than 0, or else it really doesn't work. Some interesting stats for you on, so does anybody not, or who knows what the Inc. 500 is? Okay, so folks in the room that don't know what the Inc. 500 is, the Inc. 500 is a list published by Inc. magazine every year of the 500 fastest growing privately held companies in the United States. So take that with a grain of salt because A, there are companies that don't want to disclose their financials, and to be on this list, you actually have to submit your actual tax returns that are signed by your accountant. There are also, so there are companies that don't want to be on the list, companies that don't want to release their financials, but it's probably a better list than like the top 10 hottest startups of Toronto or top 10 hottest startups of Boston. There's a little more in it to validate that those folks are actually building a business that's scaling with revenue. 77% of those 500 in 2012 founded on personal savings. 33% started with less than 10 grand, right? So here are companies that are very, very large, much larger than buy-sell ads, and a very significant portion of them were bootstrapped. Here's us purchasing the copy of Inc. 500. We bought as many as they had, and then we went back the next day and bought as many as they had again. That was kind of fun. And so what did it cost us to get started? So our domain name was $2,200. A dedicated server was about $350. Authorized.net account, $35. SSL certificate, about $100. And email hosting, $5. My final apology to John, and the final time I'll mention Authorized.net. Less than 1% of companies each year raise venture capital. It's very few companies. 76% of tech companies acquired in 2012 had not raised institutional investment, meaning venture capital or private equity, prior to acquisition. So it's not the way we hear things play out in the gossip tech mags online, but those are very real stats on what actually happens. Yet, if we go to Google and search for the keyword bootstrap on TechCrunch, there's 14,100 results. If we clean that up a little bit, thanks to Twitter Bootstrap, Bootstrap.js, and Bootstrap CSS, there's 9,370 results, okay? So if we search for venture capital funding on the site TechCrunch, all of a sudden here come all the ads. You see those pop in that we didn't have on the last slide? No ads for bootstrapping, plastered with ads for venture capital. But anyway, there's 143,000 results, right? Yet, 1% of companies actually raise venture funding that are started each year. For each bootstrap-related article written on TechCrunch, there's over 15 written about companies with venture funding. So let's take a look at a more serious publication. I went to the Harvard Business Review. So venture capital is what I typed into the search bar, and there's 1,271 results. Does anybody want to guess how many there were for bootstrapping? That's actually not a bad guess. Bootstrap, 9. I wrote it out just to make sure you know I didn't leave out a digit. Okay? The best part, the number 2 result is from 1992. 1992. I don't even know what was happening in 1992. What gives? It's just the way it is. You know, if you're going to bootstrap, you're not going to live the glorious life. We launched this product called Buy-Sell Ads Pro in December, and this thing is absolutely gorgeous. Obviously, I'm not going to call my own child ugly, but we put so much work into this product. It's a very, very large product. It does so many cool things. It's not just another ad server, and we couldn't secure coverage to save our life. We had to call in a favor at the Next Web just so I could save face as a CEO. To have something written about this product. Now, it doesn't mean that these publications should have written about the product, right? Because the truth about bootstrapping, and the only thing you really need to know, is that nobody cares. And that's the most valuable lesson to take away from this talk about bootstrapping. Nobody cares, so you got to get over it. You're just not going to get the kind of press that venture-funded companies will get. So if you need to win awards, it's kind of like the senior superlatives, right? The most intellectual, most likely to succeed, the best dressed. If you need to build traction through press coverage, go raise some money. It's okay. But wait, let's do the math. So let's say we have widget company. We give away 35% of the company in exchange for $3 million in our Series A. we allocate 20% to employees and executives, 25% in exchange for a 7 million Series B, and then 10% for each founder. Let's assume there's 2 founders. So I made it to 100%. All right, now let's take into consideration that 50% of exits are less than $50 million. This is from a CB Insight study, which was the same similar chart that I had earlier in the presentation. So let's take the best case of the 50 million. Let's say we sell Widget Co. for $50 million, and it's all cash. No stock, all cash, wire transfer. Investor 1 owns 35%, so they get $17.5 million. The employees get to split up about $10 million from their 20% option pool. Investor 2 owns 25%, and oops, that each is out of place, sorry about that. Investor 2 gets $12.5 million, and each founder that owns 10% gets $5 million bucks. Now, don't forget about Uncle Sam. Once we take out Uncle Sam's cut, each founder is left with $4 million. Now, $4 million on paper, and I'm sure if I had $4 million in my bank account, I might think about it a little bit differently. It's definitely a lot of money, but what can you really do with $4 million bucks, right? A, you can pay off your mortgage, or you can buy a house, and then you get to watch it collect dust in your bank account. You're going to be too scared to spend it. And we didn't even assume what would happen if it were a cash and stock deal. And most deals these days are definitely part cash, part stock. So they may have ended up with only $2 million bucks in their bank, right? And they sold their company for $50 million. That's a lot of money. Now let's take a look at if it had been bootstrapped with $0 raised. Each founder owns 45%, assuming there are 2 founders, $22.5 million each. The employees own 10%. Typically in bootstrap companies, you're not going to have as large of an option pool. So we get to our $50 million, and after Uncle Sam, each founder takes home $18 million bucks. What can you do with $18 million bucks? You can pay off your mortgage or buy a house. You watch it collect dust in your bank account. And the number 3 thing, which is most important, you can spend as much time with your family for the rest of your life as you want, right? So that's where the win comes in there. So let's get back to the frown. What I'm saying now, which I don't think you'll expect me to say in a talk about bootstrapping, because I should be bashing venture capital, is that there's absolutely nothing wrong with raising money. There are people who do it. There are people who do it very successfully. There are very large businesses built who raise a ton of cash. It's high risk, high reward, right? And it's other people's money. It's not your own. Just this week, right? Zynga shuts down, oh my God, Pop after 1 year after buying it for $200 million. That's crazy. How did that money evaporate? And the other thing that, as much as we like to see companies who raise money, it's an exciting thing. They're really getting into debt, They're working for somebody other than just Uncle Sam. And it's bad enough working for Uncle Sam. And the thing is that all money comes with strings attached, so you just got to be sure you're ready to accept those strings that are going to be attached to it. And I think every founder who goes through raising a bunch of money, and I can't say this from experience clearly because I haven't raised money, but you're definitely getting into a much different game. And there's nothing wrong with it. Just because you're bootstrapping now as well doesn't mean you always have to bootstrap. Here's a handful of companies, right? Best Buy, Microsoft, Patagonia, GitHub, Braintree, Craigslist, they all bootstrapped in the beginning. And the difference is that, folks like Microsoft and GitHub, those founders are stupid rich now, but it's because of bootstrapping. They didn't come out of the gates looking to raise a bunch of money. They built their businesses, they made their businesses profitable, and when the time was right, they raised some money. So, why are we at Buy-Sell Ads not raising capital? I have a few answers, many reasons. I honestly don't know what we'd do with the money. I don't feel like we have a well-oiled enough machine where I could just pour this fountain of money on it and have it grow into this larger pool of money. I just don't think that would happen. It's too early. We like being in total control. We build whatever the heck we want to build every day when we wake up. Sure, we have customer things that we need to deal with. But right now we're building, I don't even know how many new products. We're building promoted, tapped, Advertiser Pro, and there's one more that I'm forgetting. But the point is we're just going out there and building stuff now because we want to build it. If we had raised money, that might not necessarily be the case. There may have been some other folks who'd have to buy in on that. And we just like to rage against the machine. We like being the underdogs. We like feeling like we're going up against people that have deeper pockets. It makes us feel empowered to be in that presumably inferior position. But we think it's the best position. And we're a family-first company. Just last week, Friday at 10:25 a.m., I took an hour off, and I was working from home that day and just hung out with my daughter, right? So like Dan was talking about taking breaks and stuff like this, if we're a venture-funded company, I'd like to think that it might be a little bit different. Clearly, there are exceptions to every rule, but being bootstrapped, we get to kind of pave our own way and be fully responsible for our own decisions. We're also a remote team, right? So we've got folks spread out all over the world, North America, some Europe. We even have a guy in Bangladesh. While there are examples of very large distributed teams that have significant venture funding, it's definitely the exception, not the rule. I'm also nervous that what would change if we did raise some money, What would happen with somebody else in there potentially calling some of the shots? And we're not interested in operating unprofitably. I like to sleep at night, and I sleep well knowing that we're profitable because it feels like that's what works for us. And I don't want to sit here worry about this $5 million that we've invested ahead of growth, and what if that growth doesn't come? Whereas if we're bootstrapped, we can change and turn those things off that aren't working very quickly and very easily. I guess what I'd say to you all is let your passion prevail. Don't get caught up in all the hype. And build, ship. That's what makes the world go round. And most importantly, whip out the spreadsheet, whip out Excel. Make sure the math works before you dive in if you're looking to make some money from it and have it support your family. Questions? Anything? We've got free t-shirts for anybody who asks a question.
So you talked a little bit about acquisition being sort of a way out for companies with VC funding. But how do you buy out those investors, and what are the sort of ways to get out of being owned by investors if you do have those types of investments?
I think it's a really hard thing to do once you get into bed with a bunch of money, because there's not going to be a very easy way to get that money out. Clearly if something's working out, they're going to want to see as much return as they can get. That's why they gave you that money. They're putting it to work. And so I don't think it's going to be very easy to, I'd be surprised to see many venture funded companies that actually buy out their investors if it's going really well. Yeah. What size t-shirt? All right.
So yeah, my question is, do you always start your companies or ideas and building the product with the end goal in mind is to sell it off, or do you want to keep some of it close to the heart or whatever?
Yeah, so our biggest product is buy-sell ads. We over the years we also acquired Fusion Ads. Nobody knows this yet, but we also acquired Carbon Ads in December, and also 50% of a Christian ad network called Beacon Ads. We also bought Drew's yogurt, yeah. And we also bought Syndicate Ads. So while we may seem like kind of the I don't know what you want to call it, but like the ad jerks, like buying all the nice, lovely little ad shops, So we've been on like the other side of that, buying other people's kind of side projects. We haven't actually sold anything off that we've built. I think we'd shut stuff down before we'd sell it off, just because I don't want to see I don't want to see any issues further down the line with any sort of intellectual property being leaked out at a sale. Not to say that like the code we're writing is patentable and all these things, but I'd just rather not deal with it. For example, we're launching a product called Promoted. It's going to be at promoted.com. I just secured acquiring that domain name today, so I'm pretty excited. If that doesn't work out, we're just going to take that and try and maybe sell it a little bit differently, So either shut down or repurpose, I think, is what I'd say.
How do you make the decision, or have you, or how would you see making the decision to stop moving forward on something that maybe is, if your target is to be bought out and it's not necessarily growing beyond a certain point where you've just made yourself a job? How do you make that call?
So in terms of trying to build something that you actually want to sell off.
Right.
Well, first of all, I think there's like a couple ways to approach it. I mean, like maybe, for example, like when I worked at HubSpot, like I saw obvious things there that I felt like they should have been building into the product, but there are more features than companies. So maybe I could have gone off and actually built that feature and then tried to sell it back to them. In terms of making the call of when to actually sell it off, was that more your question?
No, I'm saying where do you make the decision if you've built something and it's not necessarily going to the point where you're going to sell it off, and you say, oh, maybe I should put this to bed, maybe I should stop moving forward on this.
Yeah.
You've just made yourself a job, it's not really going anywhere, it's not going to get bought.
Sure. So we.
When do you decide to stop?
Yeah, when it's not making money. I mean, we actually did that. We had a product we launched in 2010 called BuySlide's Private Label, and that's actually what Beacon Ads is run on still today. And one of the reasons why we bought them is because we didn't want to have to keep supporting them in a way, because the product just wasn't getting traction with anybody else. We launched like a handful of private labels, and it became a pain to support. And so we either we told them to shut down, or we bought them. So I'd say, yeah, if it's not making money, just get rid of it. I think we saw 37 Signals do that this week too with Breeze, right? It was clear the thing just wasn't making any money, so they shut it down 4 months in. So, in bootstrapping, the money side kind of rules all decisions,
So since you started the company and you've probably played a lot of roles over the course of its existence, what do you kind of find yourself doing now in the role of the company? And is there anything that you still kind of do that you used to do when you first started it that has carried over to today?
That's a good question. So right now, over the last year, we've hired 10 more people. So we've grown from 9 or 10 to 19 now. And a lot of the folks we've hired has been to help relieve me of some duties that I was still kind of doing. Stuff like processing cash outs. I don't know why, but I just love to send publishers money, right? And so I'd sit there all day hitting the cash out button, or logging into we use Bill.com to cut physical checks. So I'd log in and cut them checks. Stuff like that we've been hiring folks to do now. Today I'm still involved in a lot of product. So a lot of, in hiring these people, what that's allowed me to do is to get back into product. So like this site I just talked about, promoted.com, we started working on it maybe 4 weeks ago. We've got something working now. When I get back next week, we're going to try and actually launch it with a few publishers. So I'll be just working on that product. Even with BuySlides Pro, I still did I can't say I did all the UI, but I did a lot of the UI. I'm still doing a lot of front-end work in general. And that's where I feel at home. So.
With all these other businesses that you do acquire, are these things that you actively sought out, or did you have them approach you? And if you do go for them, how much of your time do you spend looking for opportunities, I suppose?
That's a good question. So it's been a little bit of both. Fusion Ads, we went out and we said we wanted to acquire it because we felt like we dealt with a lot of the same advertisers. We personally had felt like it had been a little bit stagnant, and we thought we could bring some some more growth to it. We felt like it had a lot more potential than what was going on. Some others have approached us. For example, Syndicate Ads, it was going to be shut down, and we said, hey, wait, we think it's great. Let's keep this going. And we haven't changed a lot with some of these. We've just run them a little bit differently, and we've tried to run them as independent businesses and keep them profitable on their own. Because first and foremost, I mean, we're taking money out of our own pocket to buy these things, right? If that money isn't going to acquire these things, it's going into our bank accounts, right? So it's a serious decision and a big investment for us. And yeah, we definitely actively seek things out, but it's got to feel right. It's got to be right. So.
Any other questions? All right, great. Thanks, Todd.
Thanks, guys.